everything is going to sound so much more natural and a lot more like you, like yourself.
Welcome to Quirky French Podcast, the podcast that helps you speak more confidently, feel more focused, and be more in control of your French learning journey. Prêt? C'est parti!
Salut! Welcome to episode 17 of Quirky French Podcast, the podcast where I'm going to give you my little tips to help you reach fluency and become confident in French. I'm Naima from quirkyfrench.com, and today I want to give you some tips to help you improve your pronunciation. Now, the thing about pronunciation is that you put in a lot of effort in trying to improve your pronunciation, but you don't really have the tools to actually know if you're heading in the right direction. And so I want to offer you a couple of tools that you can incorporate in your study routine and that will take your pronunciation to a whole other level. You will immediately start to feel the benefits from day one. So without further ado, let's talk about the two little quirky tips I'm going to give you to improve your pronunciation, okay? Starting with the first tip. So the key to improving your pronunciation is to learn to study what you say well, what you need to work on, and so on, and really to be able to monitor your progress. How do you do that if you don't have a native speaker available around you to give you feedback? How do you know that you're actually saying things well and that you need to work on some areas in your pronunciation? Let's be honest, you're not going to like what you hear. Literally, because my quirky tip today involves recording your own voice. Record yourself as you speak French. Listen and spot your mistakes. You're going to get to study your voice, your pronunciation, your intonation, and you're going to be able to spot what you do well, spot what you need to work on, but you're not going to like what you hear. It might not be fun. In fact, I think it's going to be super awkward, right? So you may not recognize yourself. Perhaps your personality is going to sound a little off. And at first, all you're going to notice is your accent, your weird pronunciation, all of the awkward silences, and yeah, it's not going to sound very nice, but stick to it. In fact, record yourself over and over again. What's amazing is when you have a recording of the same speech, for example, the same paragraph that you've recorded over a certain period of time, and you'll be so proud of yourself when you compare your very first recording with the last one. You'll start to notice that not only your pronunciation is actually much better now, but your intonation, your pace, your overall flow and your style, everything is going to sound so much more natural and a lot more like you, like yourself. And I genuinely cannot wait for you to start doing this because it is as awkward in the beginning as it is rewarding. So yes, start recording yourself, monitor your progress. You can record the same thing over and over again and compare, or you can simply just record as you go if you want to as well. Just use the recording device that you probably have on your mobile phone. Super straightforward, very, very powerful tip here. Okay, now on to my quirky tip number 2. Robots are your best allies. I know that sounds weird. And if you want to sound like a real, like native speaker, or at least if you want to speak with an accurate enough accent to make yourself understood by native speakers, why robots? So here's the thing. Humans are wired to adapt to accents. We have a natural ability to adapt and to adjust our comprehension in spite of someone's accent. And I've got good and bad news about that. The good news is that your current pronunciation is probably already okay. If you spoke to me right now, chances are I can already understand you. And that's great news. So you can take a breather and relax because you already sound okay. But what's the bad news? Well, it's also a bad thing because you're less likely to get pronunciation feedback from native speakers for that very reason. I mean, unless you're actively asking for feedback and corrections, and unless the person you speak to is a teacher or a coach, you may not get good quality feedback that will help you improve and address your pronunciation issues. So now we need to turn to non-human feedback. In particular, we need to talk about how Google Translate can be a fabulous ally to help you improve your pronunciation. And contrarily to humans, Google doesn't detect accents. And that's a great thing because Google Translate has an option that allows you to dictate anything. So now you can dictate your speech to Google. Google is going to help you identify and spot your weak points and pronunciation issues. If Google writes the word correctly, you're good to go. It's really powerful because if you don't know what you need to work on, this way of working with Google Translate will highlight those for you. Okay? There are many ways that you can use those two tips, recording yourself and using Google Translate. For example, you can practice speaking spontaneously, just coming up with a sentence, on the spot. And you can also read a text out loud. I really like the idea of just reading something because you don't really need to think about what you need to say. You can just focus on your pronunciation, how you place your mouth, your jaw, your tongue, and so on. So it's really powerful if you just want to target pronunciation issues. I suggest also that you work your way up. For example, when you use Google Translate, type in a single word that you may find challenging. And in Google Translate, you can actually play back the word. So you'll have something that you can emulate, and then you can dictate that word back to Google, making sure that it understands you and that it actually writes out the word. So you can now raise the bar and you can write out a full sentence. Play back the sentence to hear it and then dictate it and check if Google understood what you said. And then raise the bar again. And now you can write out a full paragraph, like a full text, play it back to hear what it's supposed to sound like, and then dictate it back to Google. Now, the playback option is great because if you click on the playback option, you'll hear it with a pretty regular speed. But if you click a second time, the reading is going to be a lot slower. So that's great to help you listen and really pay attention to how you're supposed to pronounce that text. Now, of course, I need to make a little disclaimer about Google Translate. The thing is, with the playback option, when Google reads something for you, you need to be aware that the voice speaking is not a human voice, it's a synthetic voice. And the pronunciation, although it is perfect, it is also going to be extremely neutral. That means that there's not going to be any emotion attached to that word. You need to keep that in mind because the pronunciation will be perfect, but perfect doesn't necessarily mean natural because humans have emotions and the same word can sound different based on your emotions. And that's why we've got different intonations, whether we're happy or angry. And I could say exactly the same word, exactly the same sentence with the same words order and sound very, very different. So keep that in mind because this exercise is going to help you with the pronunciation, but it's not necessarily going to help you with finding your style and finding your personality in French. But it's an amazing tool, so I strongly recommend that you use those two techniques. Okay? So that's it for today. I cannot wait for you to start doing those little tips. I'm going to catch up with you next week for another episode of Quirky French Podcast. And as always, keep learning, keep growing, and keep it quirky. Allez, on se reparle la semaine prochaine. Salut, salut. Ciao.